The air tasted of ash and terror. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the evacuation bus window, watching helicopters thunder overhead, their massive water buckets swinging like pendulums against the smoke-blackened sky. Behind him, 12-year-old Sarah clutched her communication device, her cerebral palsy making her movements jerky as she tried to process the chaos engulfing their world. "Why are they saying we did this?" she managed to type, her electronic voice cutting through the diesel rumble and frightened whispers of the other children from Sunrise Special Needs Camp. 24 hours earlier, the morning had dawned perfect for their planned nature walk. The disabled children had been excited about their forest expedition, their specialized wheelchairs and mobility aids carefully prepared for the gentle trails of Ponderosa National Forest. Marcus, their head counselor, had spent weeks coordinating with forest rangers, ensuring every path was accessible, every safety protocol in place. The camp served 43 children with various disabilities, from autism spectrum disorders to physical limitations. And this outdoor experience represented months of careful planning and fundraising. Sarah had been particularly thrilled. Her communication device, a tablet mounted to her wheelchair, buzzed constantly with her observations about birds, trees, and cloud formations. "Look at those cumulus clouds," she had typed earlier that morning, her eyes bright with intelligence despite her body's limitations. "They're building up. Weather might change." The other children gathered around her, their diverse disabilities creating a beautiful tapestry of human resilience and curiosity. Karen Whitfield had been monitoring the camp's activities for weeks from her real estate office window. At 52, she possessed the kind of predatory business instinct that had made her wealthy but left her morally bankrupt. The camp occupied 60 acres of prime forest-adjacent land, worth approximately $12 million in the current market. Her development company, Whitfield Enterprises, had been circling the property like vultures. But the nonprofit status and community support made acquisition nearly impossible through conventional means. "Those freaks are going to destroy property values," she had muttered to her assistant, Jennifer, while watching the children's bus depart for their nature walk. "Who wants to live next to a facility for the mentally defective?" Jennifer had shifted uncomfortably, having a nephew with Down syndrome, but remained silent. Karen's bigotry wasn't news to anyone who worked with her, though few dared challenge her directly. The forest walk had proceeded beautifully. Marcus guided the group along the specially selected trail, pointing out native flora and fauna while maintaining constant vigilance over his charges. Tommy Rodriguez, a 14-year-old with autism, had become fascinated with a family of squirrels, his usual social anxiety melting away as he observed their behavior. "They're storing acorns for winter," he said quietly, his first voluntary comment of the day. Rebecca, a counselor specializing in adaptive recreation, helped the wheelchair-bound children navigate a slight incline, her patient voice encouraging each small victory. "That's it. David, you're doing great. Just a little more." The children's laughter echoed through the trees, a sound of pure joy that seemed to harmonize with the bird songs and rustling leaves. At 2:47 p.m., according to later satellite imagery analysis, lightning struck a dead pine approximately 3 miles northeast of the children's location. The tree, weakened by bark beetle infestation and drought conditions, ignited immediately. Within minutes, the fire had spread to surrounding deadfall, creating a crown fire that began racing through the canopy at nearly 30 miles per hour. The National Weather Service later confirmed that atmospheric conditions were perfect for rapid fire, spread low humidity, high temperatures, and sustained winds from the southwest. Karen had been driving past the forest entrance when she spotted the first wisps of smoke. Instead of immediately reporting the fire, she made a calculated decision that would destroy lives and cost taxpayers nearly $2 billion. She parked her Mercedes and dialed 911, her voice carefully modulated to convey panic and authority. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. This is Karen Whitfield from Whitfield Enterprises. I'm at Ponderosa National Forest, and I need to report arson. There's a group of disabled kids with lighters and matches, and they've set the forest on fire. They're developmentally disabled and don't understand what they're doing. But the fire is spreading fast. You need to send everything you have immediately. The dispatcher, trained to trust caller credibility, immediately escalated the report. Ma'am, can you see the children now? Are they in immediate danger? Yes. They're about half a mile in. They have wheelchairs and those electronic talking devices. The fire is spreading toward the main road. You need to evacuate the entire area and arrest whoever's responsible for bringing dangerous mentally disabled kids into a dry forest with incendiary devices. Within 8 minutes, the first fire engines arrived, followed by county sheriff's deputies and Forest Service personnel. The incident commander, Chief Robert Hayes, immediately established a command post and began coordinating suppression efforts. However, Karen's false report had contaminated the initial response, diverting crucial resources toward a supposed arson investigation rather than focusing solely on fire suppression. Meanwhile, Marcus had noticed the smoke and immediately began evacuating his group. His emergency whistle pierced the forest air as he called for attention. Everyone, we need to move quickly but safely back to the bus. This is not a drill. The children, well trained in emergency procedures, responded with admirable discipline despite their various challenges. Sarah's communication device spoke clearly. Is that a fire, Mr. Marcus? It smells like burning wood. Her sensory processing, heightened by her autism, had detected the smoke before most others. Tommy, his anxiety spiking, began his repetitive hand-flapping motion, but Rebecca quickly intervened with his familiar comfort techniques. Deep breaths. Tommy, we're going to walk together, just like we practiced. Everyone stays together. The counselors moved with practiced efficiency, ensuring no child was left behind, while maintaining the calm leadership necessary to prevent panic. As they emerged from the forest trail, they encountered a wall of emergency responders. Sheriff's deputies immediately surrounded the group, their hands resting on their weapons. Deputy Martinez, following the arson report, approached Marcus with aggressive authority. Sir, we're going to need you and all the children to remain here for questioning. We have reports of arson, and we need to search all bags, wheelchairs, and personal items for incendiary devices. Marcus felt his blood pressure skyrocket. Officer, we need to evacuate immediately. The fire is spreading, and these children have special medical needs. Several require regular medication, and stress can trigger seizures in some of our kids. The children are suspects in an arson investigation. No one leaves until we complete our search and questioning. The deputy's tone brooked no argument, despite the visible smoke now billowing over the treetops. The next hour became a nightmare of bureaucratic insanity. While the fire doubled in size every 20 minutes, consuming thousands of acres of pristine forest, disabled children were subjected to invasive searches and interrogation. Sarah's communication device was confiscated as potential evidence, leaving her unable to express her growing terror and confusion. Tommy's anxiety reached crisis levels, his stimming behaviors intensifying until Rebecca feared he might have a meltdown that could require medical intervention. Karen had positioned herself strategically at the command post, reinforcing her false narrative with increasingly elaborate details. The tall one, the counselor, he was directing them, I saw him hand lighters to at least 3 of the wheelchair kids. They were laughing when the fire started, like they thought it was funny. Chief Hayes, under enormous pressure as the fire threatened residential areas, made the decision to treat the children as potential arsonists while simultaneously beginning massive evacuation procedures. The cognitive dissonance of the situation treating disabled children as both victims requiring evacuation and criminals requiring detention created operational chaos that hampered effective response. By 6 p.m., the fire had consumed over 15,000 acres. Governor Patricia Williams declared a state of emergency and activated the National Guard. The evacuation zone expanded to include 3 entire townships, displacing over 40,000 residents. Karen's false report had triggered a chain reaction that transformed a natural disaster into a human catastrophe. The media descended like locusts. News vans lined the highways, leading to the evacuation centers, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky now permanently stained orange and black. Channel 7. News reporter Amanda Foster broke the story that would dominate national headlines for weeks. This is Amanda Foster, reporting live from the Ponderosa Fire Evacuation Zone, where sources confirm that a group of disabled children from a local summer camp may have accidentally started what's now being called the most destructive wildfire in county history. The children, who suffer from various mental and physical disabilities, were reportedly unsupervised when the fire began. The report was factually wrong in every detail, but it spread across social media with viral intensity. Within hours, "Disabled arsonists" was trending on Twitter, accompanied by vicious commentary about the dangers of letting mentally defective children roam free in forests. The camp's phone lines were overwhelmed with death threats and demands for criminal prosecution. At the emergency shelter, the children huddled together in confusion and terror. Many had been separated from their medications during the chaotic evacuation, and several were experiencing medical crises. Emma, a 16-year-old with severe autism, had been nonverbal and self-injuring since losing her weighted blanket and noise-canceling headphones in the evacuation. The shelter volunteers, despite their good intentions, were unprepared for the specialized needs of disabled children in crisis. Marcus worked frantically to contact parents while providing damage control interviews to increasingly hostile reporters. These children had nothing to do with starting this fire, he insisted to Channel 12's aggressive interviewer. They were 3 miles away when lightning struck. We have GPS tracking data from their wheelchairs and medical devices that proves their location. But witnesses report seeing the children with incendiary devices. Are you saying these witnesses are lying? The reporter's tone suggested he had already decided the children's guilt. I'm saying someone has provided false information, and it's causing irreparable harm to vulnerable children who are victims, not perpetrators, of this disaster. Karen watched the interviews from her hotel room, having evacuated her own home as a precautionary measure. Her plan was working perfectly. Public opinion was solidly against the camp, and she had already instructed her lawyers to begin preparing offers for the land once the facility's insurance was canceled and they faced inevitable bankruptcy from lawsuits. However, she hadn't anticipated the tenacity of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a fire science professor at the State University who had been following the incident with growing skepticism. Dr. Rodriguez had spent 20 years studying wildfire patterns and had never encountered a case where disabled children could start and spread a fire of this magnitude and intensity. The burn patterns don't match arson, she explained to her graduate assistant, Michael. This fire started with a single ignition point in the crown of a dead tree, then spread through connected canopy. That's classic lightning strike behavior. Human-caused fires typically start at ground level and spread outward in different patterns. Working through the night, Dr. Rodriguez analyzed satellite imagery, weather data, and burn progression maps. Her findings were unambiguous. The fire had started from a lightning strike at the exact moment that National Weather Service Doppler radar showed electrical activity in that precise location. The children had been over 3 miles away, heading back toward their bus. But her evidence competed with Karen's emotionally compelling narrative and the media's investment in the disabled arsonist story. News outlets had committed significant resources to covering the angle, and admitting error would require complex corrections that might confuse audiences and damage ratings. The fire continued its rampage for 6 more days. The final statistics were staggering: 127,000 acres burned, 247 homes destroyed, 34 businesses eliminated, and an estimated $1.8 billion in property damage and suppression costs. 13 people died in evacuation-related accidents, and hundreds were injured. The tourism industry in 3 counties collapsed, creating unemployment that would last for years. Insurance companies, facing unprecedented claims, immediately began raising rates for anyone living within 50 miles of the burn zone. Property values plummeted as buyers feared future fire risk. Small businesses that had operated for generations closed permanently, unable to afford reconstruction or increased insurance premiums. The disabled children became pariahs in their own community. Families received death threats, and several children were disenrolled from their schools by districts fearing liability issues. The camp's operating license was suspended pending investigation, leaving dozens of families without their primary source of respite care and their children without crucial developmental services. Sarah's family was particularly hard hit. Her father, a construction worker, had been forced to take unpaid leave to provide full-time care after the camp closed. Her mother, a nurse, was working double shifts to compensate for lost income while managing Sarah's complex medical needs. The stress was overwhelming their marriage and Sarah's already fragile health. "I don't understand why people hate us," Sarah typed one evening, her electronic voice cutting through her parents' whispered argument about mounting bills. "We didn't do anything wrong. Why won't anyone believe us?" Her father, typically a strong man, broke down crying. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes the world isn't fair to people like you, and it makes me so angry I can't breathe." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jennifer, Karen's assistant, had been struggling with increasing guilt over her silence. Her nephew Pablo, born with Down syndrome, attended a similar program, and she couldn't reconcile Karen's vicious characterizations with her lived experience of disabled children's gentleness and vulnerability. During a routine office conversation, Karen revealed too much about her land acquisition plans. "Once their insurance gets canceled and the lawsuits start, we'll be able to pick up that property for pennies on the dollar. The community will never accept another facility for the mentally disabled after this disaster. We'll clear the land and build luxury condominiums with forest views." Jennifer secretly recorded the conversation on her phone. That evening, she contacted Dr. Rodriguez, whom she had seen defending the children on local news. The evidence she provided transformed the investigation. Dr. Rodriguez immediately contacted federal authorities. The FBI opened a case file on Karen for filing false reports that had triggered a federal emergency response. The investigation revealed a pattern of Karen's business practices that included insurance fraud, discriminatory lending, and manipulating zoning boards to acquire properties below market value. The satellite evidence was overwhelming. Multiple independent sources confirmed that lightning had struck the forest at the exact moment weather data showed electrical activity. The children's GPS tracking data, retrieved from their medical devices and wheelchairs, proved they were 3 miles away and walking toward safety when the fire started. The media correction process was painful and slow. Channel 7 issued formal apologies, but continued emphasizing the tragic misunderstanding, rather than acknowledging their role in spreading false information that had destroyed lives. Social media responses to the corrections were mixed, with many users refusing to accept that they had been wrong about the children's culpability. Federal investigators, however, were thorough and relentless. Karen's phone records revealed her 911 call had been made from a location where she could not possibly have witnessed the children's activities. Her financial records showed suspicious activity consistent with planning to acquire the camp's property. Most damning. The recorded conversation with Jennifer revealed clear criminal intent to profit from her false accusations. The community's response to the truth was complicated. Many residents felt betrayed by Karen's deception, but remained uncomfortable acknowledging their own prejudices against disabled people. Support for the camp was slow to rebuild, hampered by ongoing fears about fire risk and property values. However, some community members stepped forward with remarkable courage and compassion. Patricia Williams, a retired teacher whose grandson had autism, organized Justice for Our Kids, a grassroots movement demanding accountability and support for the affected families. Her organization raised funds for the family's immediate needs while lobbying for legislative changes to prevent similar incidents. "These children have endured trauma that most adults couldn't handle," she declared at a packed town hall meeting. "They've been accused, threatened, and abandoned by the very community that should protect them. We owe them more than apologies. We owe them justice and our commitment to do better." The legal proceedings against Karen moved swiftly once federal prosecutors took over the case. She was charged with filing false reports to federal authorities, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, endangering public safety, and civil rights violations for targeting disabled children with discriminatory false accusations. During the trial, prosecutor Maria Santos painted a devastating picture of Karen's calculated cruelty. The defendant didn't just lie about seeing a fire. She deliberately chose to blame vulnerable disabled children, knowing that public prejudice would make her lies more believable and the children's denials less credible. This wasn't a moment of panic or poor judgment. This was a premeditated assault on some of our community's most vulnerable members. Karen's defense attorney tried to frame the incident as a misunderstanding during a crisis, but the recorded evidence was impossible to overcome. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Robert Chen sentenced Karen to 8 years in federal prison, plus restitution of $127 million to be distributed among fire victims. Her real estate assets were seized to partially cover the damages, though the amount represented only a fraction of the total losses. "Your actions didn't just start a legal fire," Judge Chen told Karen during sentencing. "They ignited hatred and prejudice that caused immeasurable harm to innocent children and their families. The forest will regrow, but the trauma you've inflicted on these children may last their entire lives." The camp's reconstruction became a community-wide effort once the truth was fully established. Federal emergency funds provided the initial capital, but local businesses, churches, and individuals contributed labor, materials, and ongoing support. The new facility incorporated advanced fire safety systems and emergency protocols while maintaining its mission of serving disabled children. Sarah was among the first children to return when the camp reopened 2 years later. Her communication device had been upgraded with new features, and she had learned to advocate more effectively for herself and her peers. The trauma had changed her, adding a gravity to her young wisdom that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "I used to think everyone was basically good," she typed during her first interview after the camp reopened. Now I know that some people choose to be cruel, but other people choose to fight for what's right. I want to be one of the people who fights. Marcus returned as head counselor. Though the experience had aged him visibly, he implemented new safety protocols and advocacy training for both staff and campers. We can't prevent all prejudice and hatred, he told new staff members during orientation. But we can prepare our kids to face the world with strength and dignity. The broader community slowly healed. Though scars remained, property values eventually recovered, and tourism returned as the forest regenerated. The fire's aftermath had created habitats for new wildlife, and hiking trails now included educational markers about forest ecology and fire management. Dr. Rodriguez's wildfire research gained national recognition, leading to improved protocols for investigating fire causes and preventing false accusations during emergency responses. Her work contributed to federal guidelines requiring multiple sources of evidence before criminal charges could be filed in arson cases involving vulnerable populations. Jennifer received whistleblower protection and used her experience to become an advocate for people with disabilities. She testified before state legislatures about the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the importance of protecting vulnerable populations from false accusations. The legal precedent set by Karen's case strengthened protections for disabled individuals against discriminatory false reporting. Several states passed Karen's law legislation, increasing penalties for filing false reports that specifically target protected classes of people. On the 5th anniversary of the fire, the community held a memorial service that was also a celebration of resilience. Speakers included fire survivors, camp families, and community leaders who had worked for justice and healing. The forest itself served as a backdrop, its new growth symbolizing renewal and hope. Sarah, now 17 and preparing for college, delivered the keynote address. Her communication device projected her words clearly across the gathered crowd. 5 years ago, someone tried to destroy us with lies. They didn't succeed because truth is stronger than hatred, and love is stronger than fear. We're still here. We're still growing. We're still fighting for a world where everyone belongs. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the forest, where phoenix-like, new life had emerged from the ashes of destruction. The children who had been falsely accused were now young adults, many heading to college or starting careers, their resilience having transformed them into powerful advocates for justice and inclusion. Tommy Rodriguez, who had struggled with severe anxiety during the crisis, had become a peer counselor, helping other autistic youth develop coping strategies. Emma, who had been nonverbal during the evacuation, was now studying to become a special education teacher. Each child had found their own path to healing and purpose. The camp continued its mission with enhanced resources and community support. The fire had ultimately strengthened rather than destroyed the bonds between disabled children and their community, proving that truth and compassion could overcome even the most destructive lies. Karen remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted and her reputation permanently destroyed. Her real estate empire had collapsed, and her name had become synonymous with the dangers of prejudice and false accusations. Occasionally, disability rights activists would visit her story as a cautionary tale about the real-world consequences of discrimination and hatred. The forest itself told the final chapter of the story, where the fire had burned hottest. The most beautiful wildflowers now bloomed each spring. Nature had transformed destruction into regeneration, just as the human community had transformed hatred into healing. The children who had been blamed for destruction had become agents of restoration, their courage and dignity inspiring a movement for justice that spread far beyond their small community. Years later, when researchers studied the incident for academic papers on crisis communication and disaster response, they consistently noted how truth had ultimately prevailed over prejudice, but only through the persistent efforts of individuals who refused to accept injustice. The case became a textbook example of how vulnerable populations could be victimized by false accusations during crises, but also how communities could learn, grow, and become stronger through facing their own prejudices and choosing justice over convenience. The memorial garden planted at the camp's entrance contained trees from every family affected by the fire, both those who had been evacuated and those who had been falsely accused. The garden served as a living testament to the power of truth, the resilience of the human spirit, and the possibility of redemption even after the darkest chapters of human cruelty. In the end, love had indeed proven stronger than fear, and truth had triumphed over the lies that had nearly destroyed an entire community's faith in justice and compassion.